Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today, we're talking about something that sounds almost unreal at first. You know how President Donald Trump has always been called a guy obsessed with peace. Think back, whenever there's a war breaking out somewhere in the world, Trump's instinct has usually been to step in, call for a ceasefire, and push both sides to sit down and negotiate. He's branded himself as the deal maker, the peace broker, the one who can stop the shooting. But now suddenly, Trump is making headlines for something that sounds like the complete opposite. He told reporters at the White House during a meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung on August 25th that within a week he might change the name of the Department of Defense back to its old historical name, the Department of War. Yeah, you heard that right, the Department of War. Now that sounds more than just a cosmetic change, doesn't it? Defense means protecting your homeland. War means preparing to fight. And when you hear a president, especially one who likes to call himself peace-loving, say he wants to bring back the Department of War, the first question you have to ask is, why? Is Trump preparing America for a major conflict? And if so, who does he expect that conflict to be with? Let's take a step back. A lot of the media instantly jumped on this announcement and said, Trump is breaking the law again. Trump is violating the Constitution again. You've probably seen those headlines before. But let's put the noise aside for a minute and really dig into the facts. First, some history. The Department of War isn't some new invention. It goes all the way back to 1789, literally right after the United States was founded. Back then, America was still surrounded by enemies. Britain controlled Canada to the north. Spain had colonies to the south. Mexico was a looming presence, and war could break out at any moment. The young U.S. had just one real military branch, the Army, so the government created the War Department to manage it. That was the original name, plain and simple. Later, as the country grew, the Navy got its own department. The Air Force came much later, in 1947, when it finally split from the Army. But through World War I and World War II, America's top military institution was still called the War Department, and under that name, the U.S. won some of its most decisive victories. It wasn't until 1947, with the creation of the National Military Establishment, and then in 1949, that Congress officially renamed it, the Department of Defense. Why? Not really because of political correctness, as Trump claimed. In 1949, that phrase didn't even exist in the way we use it today. The real reason was that America had just finished World War II, the Cold War was beginning, and U.S. leaders wanted to frame their military posture as defensive, not aggressive. The word defense made America look like a protector, not a conqueror. It was about international image as much as anything else. So was it just a branding exercise? In a way, yes, but it also reflected the mood of the times. Americans were tired of war, the world was fragile, and Washington wanted to project stability, not aggression. Now fast forward to today. Trump says he wants to undo that change. He argues that Department of Defense is a watered-down, politically correct name. He says the original Department of War better reflects America's true spirit, an offensive spirit, not just defensive. His words were, I don't just want to defend, I want to attack. So the obvious question, can Trump actually do this legally? Does he need Congress? The short answer, probably not. Most of the reorganizations and renamings of America's top military institutions have historically been done through executive orders by the president, not through Congress. Yes, there's a law from 1986, the Goldwater-Nichols Act, that defines how the Department of Defense is structured and how the chain of command works. But nowhere in that law does it actually require the name Department of Defense. It just describes the department as it existed at the time. So legally speaking, Trump could almost certainly sign an executive order tomorrow and change the name. Symbolically huge, practically straightforward. But again, why? Why would a man who calls himself a peace broker suddenly want his military headquarters to be called the Department of War. Here's where strategy comes in. Trump's entire foreign policy philosophy has always boiled down to one phrase: peace through strength. He genuinely hates the idea of long, endless wars. He opposed the Iraq War. He pushed to get out of Afghanistan. He constantly told European allies to take more responsibility so America wouldn't have to be the world's policeman. But at the same time, Trump believes that the only way to keep peace is to show overwhelming strength, to make your adversaries so scared of you that they never dare to start a war in the first place. Seen in that light, renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War is not about itching for a fight. It's about signaling to the world the United States is ready, willing, and able to go on the offensive if challenged. And that's meant to deter wars, not start them. Still, the symbolism is powerful, and it comes at a time when the global map of conflict is already heating up. Politico recently published an analysis identifying 5 hotspots where war is most likely to break out: the India-Pakistan border, the Taiwan Strait, the Baltic states versus Russia, the India-China border, and the Korean Peninsula. Let's go through them. Number 1. India and Pakistan. Yes, both countries have nuclear weapons. About 170 for India, 180 for Pakistan. That makes their border the most likely flashpoint for nuclear conflict on paper. But realistically, probably not. Both militaries are relatively weak compared to major powers. Both economies would be shattered by a major war, and any escalation would draw immediate intervention from the US, Russia, China, and others. Skirmishes? Sure, all-out nuclear war. Very unlikely. Number 2, the Taiwan Strait. Now here's the real powder keg. Everyone agrees this is the most dangerous place on Earth today. If China launches an invasion of Taiwan, it won't just be a regional conflict. It will reshape the entire balance of power in the Pacific. Politico even suggested that if Taiwan falls, Japan and South Korea might be forced to pursue nuclear weapons of their own. The stakes are enormous. Beijing is expanding amphibious capabilities, running more military drills, but also facing corruption scandals and inexperience with real combat. Would they risk it? Nobody knows, but the risk is real. And this is exactly the kind of threat Trump wants America prepared for. Number 3, Russia and the Baltic states. Politico claims this is a big risk. I say highly unlikely. Why? Because Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are all NATO members. And NATO's Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all. If Russia attacked the Baltics, it wouldn't just be fighting tiny countries. It would be at war with the entire NATO alliance, including the United States. Even Putin knows that's suicide. So while tensions are high, a direct Russian assault on NATO territory is almost unthinkable. Number 4, the India-China border. Again, lots of skirmishes over the years, but a full-scale war? No. India doesn't have the capacity or the appetite for a massive fight with China. Border clashes will happen, but an all-out war is off the table. Number 5, the Korean Peninsula. Now this one deserves more attention. North Korea's Kim Jong-un has been growing more aggressive, especially as US-China tensions heat up. Pyongyang may feel emboldened, thinking China will never abandon them in a showdown with the South. And if conflict broke out in Taiwan, North Korea could see that as the perfect moment to create chaos in Korea, forcing the US to fight on 2 fronts. That's a real risk. And let's not forget the South China Sea. Politico didn't even include it in their analysis. But recent clashes between Chinese and Philippine ships have already turned violent. Manila has warned that if a Filipino soldier or fisherman is killed, that would be a red line. And the Philippines has a mutual defense treaty with the United States. So a small clash in the South China Sea could easily drag in the US Navy and trigger a wider conflict. Meanwhile, what about the Middle East? Honestly, the risk of major state-to-state wars there has gone down. After 6 Arab-Israeli wars, most of the fighting today is between Israel and non-state groups like Hamas or Hezbollah. Those are ugly conflicts, but they're not world wars. Compared to the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East is almost a sideshow right now. So put it all together. Where is Trump's War Department really pointing? At China, above all. The Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, the Korean Peninsula, all roads lead back to Beijing. Trump himself basically admitted it when he told President Lee of South Korea, "We have far better cards than China. Some of those cards, if I play them, China is finished." That's classic Trump bravado, but the message is clear. He wants China and America's allies to believe that if push comes to shove, the U.S. is not afraid to fight. Now here's my evaluation. Renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War won't change how the Pentagon actually functions. The generals, the budgets, the troops, it's all the same. But symbols matter. Names send signals. And in this case, the signal is loud. America is done pretending it's only about defense. Is Trump right to call defense political correctness? Not exactly. In 1949, the change was more about Cold War messaging, not about woke language. But he's right that the old name, War Department, carried a kind of clarity that defense doesn't. It told the world America wasn't shy about using force. The bigger question is, does this strengthen peace or undermine it? On the one hand, Trump's peace through strength logic is consistent. If enemies believe America will go to war and win, they'll think twice before starting anything. On the other hand, the optics of reviving the War Department could also make adversaries more paranoid, more hostile, and more likely to arm up themselves. It could escalate tensions in exactly the places Trump wants to stabilize. So the move cuts both ways. Let me end with this thought. Trump has never really changed his philosophy. He hates endless wars. He wants America to be strong enough that no one dares challenge it. Renaming the Pentagon is part of that theater of strength. Whether it works or not will depend on how rivals interpret it. If they see it as deterrence, it could keep the peace. If they see it as provocation, it could bring the war closer. Either way, the world will be watching. Thanks for watching. See you next time.